have spent so much of our focus on the Cardinals trading down in the 2025 NFL Draft, we haven't given a ton, if any, thought to the idea of the Cardinals wanting to trade up in the 2025 NFL Draft. But in order to trade up, in order for that to be something that intrigues the Cardinals, there has to be somebody that they love enough to want to dip into their limited draft capital, the 6 picks that they have this year, and maybe some future draft picks that they have next year, to make that move upwards. Now, when I say a player to move up for, I'm not talking about Travis Hunter. I'm not talking about Abdul Carter. Those players are not going to fall into a range where the Cardinals could move up to get those guys. At least I don't think that's going to be the case. Because the first question you have to ask yourself is, where would the Cardinals want to get to? They pick 16th. Where are they going to be able to move up and not completely deplete their draft capital? Is it 2 spots to 14? Is it 3 spots to 13 with Miami? Can you get to 12 with Dallas? To me, if you start trying to go to 10, where Chicago is, I think that would cost a pretty penny. That's going to force you to move a day 2 pick. That might force you to move a future day 2 pick in next year's draft class. And I don't know if the Cardinals have an appetite for that. But you want to move up from 16 to 14, 16 to 13? Think you can do that and exchange a day 3 pick in the process. You move up a couple of spots. You move a 4th round pick, a 6th round pick. You move a pick on day 3 of the draft. I think that could be enough depending on the way this draft class plays out. So one, you have to find your landing spot. And the landing spot is not far. The Cardinals are not in a position to try to move all the way up into the top 10. If they would, it would be for somebody like a Carter or a Hunter. And if that caliber of player starts to fall, they are going to be competing with a lot of teams who are going to try to angle their way into that spot. So take those guys off the table. So now you have to ask yourself, who might they want to move up for? Here is what I think potentially could play out on draft night. You've got a couple of tackles that everybody keeps mocking inside the top 10. Will Campbell out of LSU, the kid Membuo out of Missouri. Those 2 guys constantly mocked inside the top 7. Constantly. I see them going early in this draft. Maybe they start to fall. Maybe they get to 11. Maybe they get to 12. Maybe they get to 13. Now, 13's a tough spot because you got Miami, who just watched Teron Armstead retire, so they may not want to play ball. But if one of these tackles starts to slip outside of where their ceiling might be, and they start getting closer and closer to their floor, are the Cardinals in love with one of these tackles to where they feel like they've got to move up because we didn't think Will Campbell was going to be available to us, but he's right there at 12. He's right there at 11. We can't pass up on that opportunity. Because to me, a wide receiver, I'm not going up to get a wide receiver. I'll just let the board play out. An edge rusher, I don't know, outside of Carter, maybe Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia. Maybe those guys are viewed in a tier separate from everybody else, but I think a lot of these edge guys are going to be really close grade-wise. On the Cardinals' big board, everybody's going to kind of be clumped together. So are you really going to go out of your way to get one of those guys if you view them all similarly? Are you going to give up draft capital to get one of those guys if you have them graded maybe a half point apart or a quarter of a point apart? If you're going to move up, it's going to be, I think, for one of these 2 tackles that all of a sudden starts to slide, and you think to yourself, my goodness, did not think this was even possible. We cannot pass on an opportunity to land Will Campbell. I think if there is one position that this team would go up to go get, it would be offensive tackle. Maybe if Kenneth Grant started to fall into range, they would want to go up and get him as well. But other than that, I just don't see this team positionally finding a player that starts to fall that they're interested in grabbing.
To me, when you look at it, it either has to be a tackle, maybe a Mason Graham. I can't imagine he falls past 8.
Right.
But if he gets to a 10, you move up. You said it with Jalen Walker. If he gets to a 10, 11, 12, maybe you move up. But you're right. You need to be points ahead of who you like at 16 for me to move up with only 6 picks in this draft. Isn't it about, with only 6 picks, garnering more picks, more opportunities to get players, especially in a draft that's so deep in positions you need?
Right. We have always talked about the trade down as the most likely thing that this team is going to do. The complete opposite end of the spectrum is the trade up. If you are going to trade up, it has to be for a player that you view so far and away better than everybody else on your board, and you are, I will use your phrase, shocked that player is in a range where you think you can get to, for you to completely disregard what we think the plan is going into draft night, which would be, I'll move down a couple of spots. I'll go down to 18. I'll go down to 21. I'll still get a player that I want. I'll still get a position that I want, and I'll get more draft picks. We think that is the ideal outcome. For you to go in the complete opposite direction and remove draft picks from your limited arsenal, the gap between the players on your board has to be Grand Canyon sized. And that's why it feels like we haven't spent a ton of time on it, because how often do those scenarios play out on draft night?
Not that often. I would
Laramie
imagine.
Tunsil?
Yeah, I can't think of another one other than Laramie Tunsil that was so shocking, and just continued to watch him fall down the board. And to me, I bet you the Cardinals haven't even had a conversation about moving up with any real context to it.
No.
And I can't imagine it would happen unless a Will Campbell, a Mason Graham, any of those guys fall. And listen, we talked about Mel Kiper's mock earlier. I mean, those guys are all in the top 5, all within the top 8, if you want to go deeper and say Jalen Walker's on that list. But I just would have to see them fall 4 spots from where they're mocked at now to even consider moving up in there.
To your point, I think the Cardinals have probably had way more conversations about trading down and because if you're Monty Ossenfort and you're the Cardinals front office, I think you want to go into draft night not scrambling. You want to go into draft night knowing this is where we think we're going to be comfortable moving down to. This is what we think our ask is going to be. And then you react to what these other teams are offering to you. And then you try to either meet in the middle, or maybe they overwhelm you with the trade package and you're happy with it, right? I think you go into draft night having war gamed out some of those scenarios. I don't know how many scenarios you've outlined where the Cardinals move up. That to me is sort of the scramble, reactionary on draft night. How is this guy starting to fall? Okay, what are we going to do about it? This is our 3rd-rated player on the board. We never thought he was going to be here. What do we do about it? And everybody's looking around like, do we start making phone calls? Do we start making moves? I think that's the more reactionary thing, whereas the trade down, they've had probably lengthy conversations of, this is what, if we move down this number of spots, this is what we want to get. If we move down this number of spots, this is the bare minimum of what we need to get. They probably have a really good feel of what they want to accomplish for a trade down. A trade up, it has to be the perfect scenario, and as we could only think of one scenario, one example. There's probably more that I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head, but you just don't plan for those. You just react to them in real time. And I think that's the more likely scenario. And again, I think it's a small handful of players, maybe 3 or 4 guys, where there is a huge gap on the board of where you have that player and then the rest of your board to where you look around and you go, maybe we got to do something. Maybe we got to do something bold. Again, trade down is still the most likely outcome, but I did not want us to get all the way until draft night without discussing who they may want to go up and trade up for in case we see it play out on draft night.